Hey boys and girls, well today we're going to talk about truck suspension ride and handling. And in the olden days they used to say something like it rides like a truck, and quite frankly riding like a truck meant that maybe you'd get bounced right out or you'd wind up with back pain or on and on and on. There wasn't many good attributes about riding in a truck. When I was a kid and I worked on a farm, the farmer used to have big full-size pickup trucks, and he would drive us out to the field, and the truck ride was a killer. So especially after breakfast, because the farmer's wife used to serve us breakfast. By the time you got to where you had to pick peaches or apples, guess what? You were probably pretty sick. The best story I've got is one of the guys, Billy Clyde, was yucking it up, sitting on the fender well. The farmer hit a bump and he went flying out, and the farmer did not stop. He was busy trying to think about how he was going to get us to pick peaches, and Billy was left in the dirt. So that's kind of what riding in a truck used to be like. Things are different now, a lot different. This is the Ram 1500. This vehicle won Truck of the Year, but this year it won Luxury Car of the Year, luxury vehicle. They had to change it because this is not a car. This is the kind of stuff that's happening now. This is the real new now. And when you talk about capability, this truck's already got it. It can do anything that the old trucks could do and then some. And when you talk about comfort, this really gets a double check mark. This thing's got lots of stuff that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. But in essence, trucks are not the same as what they used to be. Just like when the vans changed from basically riding like a truck and then going to the same kind of comfort as a car, this has moved in the same direction. All these trucks, all of them, ride way better than they used to. This one here is a lot better, but the others are also as good as or better than anything that used to be. The suspension allows for everything, and that's what we're going to be talking today, talking about the three leading truck manufacturers, the Ford, the Chevy, and this Ram. Okay, so we're standing underneath the Ram now, and we're going to be talking about the front suspension. And the front suspension, like pretty much everybody else, has a double wishbone suspension system. So let's have a look at what that all means. So we're going to show you a little picture underneath here, and you can see when you get in that that looks just like the thing you break apart on Thanksgiving trying to make that big wish, and hence the wishbone mantra. Let's have a look at the upper wishbone, the one that's way up there and it's kind of like black and covered in plastic. And then let's have a look at this wishbone, which came off of the Model 3. It's got the wire tabs on it. So you'll see here that this is made out of stamped steel with overmolded plastic. If it's good enough for this truck, it's probably good enough for the 3 and the Y, and that's kind of like what we're going to see. Is we're going to be seeing more and more of this overmolded plastic and things like that. So let's move over and have a look at our friend here, Mr. Musk. Very difficult to see him, but if we have a look right down here, we can see exactly what's going on, and that's a double wishbone. Very similar to what we've seen over here. The only difference being, because it's black, we're going to assume that that's a stamped steel lower control arm. I would personally go with the aluminum, like what the Ram has, but steel is what's used on the F-150 and the Silverado. So let's just have a look at this for one more thing, and that's something that we're going to talk about in a little while. This little doodad right here, that's part of an air shock system. That's different than what the F-150 and what the Silverado has. They have a coil over there. So we're going to be looking at that in a few minutes. But right now, the things that are big takeaways here, The aluminum wishbone on the bottom, the steel, stamped steel with plastic overmolding on the top, and the air shock system that are on the Ram. Okay, so now what we're going to do is talk a little bit about the knuckle, the front knuckle. Now, a lot of you have said that you're not automotive engineers or you really don't even know that much about cars. So let's just have a look at this big aluminum part right here. That is called the front knuckle. The things that tie into it are the upper and lower control arms, or in this case we're calling them the wishbones. We're looking at the steering rack mechanism that turns your wheel. Now, this is going to be fairly common to everybody. These things for the light-duty trucks are always made out of aluminum. For heavy-duty trucks, then there's a change, and they move from aluminum to cast iron or cast steel, and that's because the duty loads on these things are astronomical, and they need that extra strength. Okay, so here we are at the rear end of the Ram 1500, and what we're going to be talking about is the rear suspension. And what you're going to find with the trucks is that they have a solid axle. That means that whenever the truck goes over a bump, one will go up, one will go down. There's no four-wheel, nothing. This is going to go like this. So this is what you'd normally see on a truck of this size, and it's mainly for trucks that are body on frame. But let's talk a little bit about the Cybertruck, because it's going to be different. So the only thing we've got in the way of a Cybertruck kind of design, again, would be the Honda Ridgeline. This truck has independent front suspension and independent rear suspension. This suspension system here, this is what the Honda Ridgeline looks like, does not have a beam axle. It doesn't have anything except for what we would classify as a semi-conventional rear suspension. It has four-link suspension and a spring-over shock. However, with the towing capacities that the Cybertruck is supposed to have, I have no idea how they're going to be making that type of a system work, because this is only good for 3,500 to 5,000 pounds, whereas the independent linkage that the Cybertruck is going to have is going to be much more robust than that. So we'll have to wait and see what goes on. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention was, why is this still a solid axle? And that would be because this is really good for stability, and especially if you're towing very heavy loads. We just talked about the Ridgeline, and that's about 3,500 to 5,000 pounds. This truck can probably do about double that, but the heavy-duty versions can get up about 3 times more than that. So this is the conventional way of doing the job. Let's talk about the ancillary kinds of parts that have to go on in order to make this work. Okay, so we're showing you the Ram because it's basically a more advanced and an outlier, if you like, as far as trucks are concerned. Most trucks, for the rear end here, would have something entirely different than this. They would have leaf springs. The leaf springs, we'll show you a picture of that, but the leaf springs are the oldest way, really, of handling a truck's body load. So this is different in that we've got 2 linkage components out here, and then we have a stabilizer bar similar to what you'd have in the front, with dog bones and whatnot. And what makes this truly unique is the fact that we're looking at an air suspension system. Okay, but the benefits that you get off of putting this in, first off, this is more costly, but the benefit that you get is ride and handling. This is what made the Ram a luxury car of the year. It's the ride and the handling that makes it the best. Now, I will tell you that there are a couple of other unibodies that did have solid axles, but they're ancient, and they would be the Jeep XJ and the Jeep ZJ. These were outliers as well. It wasn't something that everybody wanted to have. The outliers are fine, but we'll be more interested in seeing how Tesla manages to accommodate the massive projections that they put out for the tri-motor Cybertruck, something like 14,000 pounds, in the absence of a solid axle. I think that the Tesla is going to surprise us. I want to see what they do to execute their rear suspension system. While it might be theoretically possible to package in an electric motor within the context of a solid axle, basically swapping out the rear diff for a motor, it would seem that this may inhibit their ability to share motors among various vehicles, configurations, and even other models. So we're hoping to see whatever Tesla's got in the way of the Cybertruck rear suspension, but for right now, it's a bit of a mystery for us. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about the air ride system that's going to be going into the Cybertruck. So the first question is why? Why do I want to do that? Well, that terrible ride that you get out of a truck, that comes because of this coil springs in the front and the leaf springs in the back. You see, what has to happen with this truck is that it's made to work, and that means it has to have a variety, like a very broad range of conditions that it's going to have to live in. So is this truck loaded? Is the truck got 4 guys in it, 5 guys in it with the crew cab? Is it got 1 person? How are we using the truck? And it's going to be different every day. And that variety of different conditions is so great that, unfortunately, you have to sacrifice something. And the thing you're going to sacrifice is the ride. The ride and drive is going to be a little on the tough side. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on here with the Cybertruck. So this car, even at the low end, this truck is even at the low end is supposed to come in at $40,000, and it has an air ride. That's very unusual. Not very many cars come in at $40,000, or trucks for that matter, that come in at $40,000 with that type of a situation. $40,000 is usually too cheap. But the Cybertruck is coming in at that price right now. So why did they do it? What's the reason behind it? Well, number one is customer satisfaction. This is going to give you a fabulous ride, full or empty. The ride and handling is going to be superb. It'll be just like in a luxury car. As a matter of fact, one of the things that happens when you look at military vehicles, tanks especially, or anything that has missiles and guns of size, they all have an air system or a system that'll keep the cabin flat while the wheels are doing all the work, or the treads. That sort of thing is how they can manage to line up and hit their targets. Without that, they'd never be able to do it. It would be impossible to control the vehicle. This vehicle is going to be designed similar to what we would see in a military type of a tank. The ride and handling is going to be flat and superb. The customer satisfaction, of course, is going to go up because it's going to be nice to ride inside of it. The other thing that can happen, or it does happen, you can see it on this picture, is load leveling and kneeling. So have a look at the distance that you've got here between the ground and the rockers versus what's looking at the front. So what's happened is these things started off as flat, but then it knelt down so that you could get the quad out without any problems. This is also good for ingress and egress. So I can drop this down when it's at the curb. Everybody gets into the truck, and then I can bring it back up. This is great for loading and unloading of people who have problems and whatnot. So these kinds of things, these types of kneeling and load leveling, that's something that everybody's going to want. So why do they do it? What's the reason or rationale behind it? So you're going to get economies of scales. If all of this is the same, if all the springs in this thing are air springs, then you're going to get a reduction. And we've seen that already in the Model X and the Model Y. We've seen it because we're noticing now that the parts that they bought before at a fairly high cost are now a little bit less because they've been in the marketplace a little bit longer. And the spot prices that we used to get are a lot lower now on the Model X. Maybe on the Model X as well, but definitely the Model 3 and the Model Y. So that economy of scale is good, but something even better than that is for the guys on the factory floor, and that's reduced complexity. All this is the same. The guys don't have to go and look for the bits and pieces that they're going to need in order to put the truck together. Everything is going to be the same. That means that my line is shorter. That means that my people don't have to work as hard. That on and on and on. It also, in fact, affects the quality, because if I'm doing exactly the same thing every time, I don't have to worry about variation, and variation is the number one rule, according to Dr. Deming, the number one rule to try and avoid, get rid of variation. So everything about this, to me, from an air ride system, is the right way to go. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit about active damping. We talked about the air springs, and we've talked about the conventional springs, the coils and the leaf springs. But active damping has to do with the shock absorbers and the struts, and that's a totally different part of the ride and drive experience. So this truck right here, the Silverado, it does not have active damping. However, its sister, the GMC product, the Sierra, it does, and it's big bucks. There's a lot of money involved in buying one of these types of vehicles with active damping. So what is active damping? Well, active damping means that there's going to be sensors that are going to adjust this ride and drive characteristics. As you're driving, it's going to be making probably hundreds, maybe thousands of calculations per second to try and open and close the orifices that are associated with each one of the, let's call them just shock absorbers that are inside the vehicle. These are not your average ordinary shock absorber with one little teeny orifice, but something that's a little more dramatic with a lot more science inside. The active damping system that you'd see on most cars are going to be relatively expensive. BMW uses it on pretty much everything from the X5 all the way up to the 7 Series. And those vehicles demand that type of a ride. For Elon Musk, he said, and you'll see the quote up there, he really likes what it does for the ride and drive characteristics, but I don't think you're going to see it on the $40,000 version. I will tell you that GM has something called Magna Ride, and it's been around since the early 2000s. And also there's the Ford Raptor, and it uses active damping. It's a fabulous car for off-roading and whatnot, particularly because of the active damping in there. And by the way, this has been around for a long time. When I worked at Ford in the 80s, we had an active damping system. And that active damping system was a great idea. Unfortunately, the technology hadn't caught up to it. So it's been around for a long, long time. The prospect of coming up with active damping on the Cybertruck is even going to make it more exciting, coupled with the air shocks, or for the air spring system. So it's summary time. So what we're going to do here, we're going to be looking at what we've discussed in the past, and that is where does the Cybertruck stand with relationship to the F-150, the Ram, and the Silverado. So let's talk about the geometry. Well, the geometry on the Cybertruck is going to be double wishbone in the front. And that's what we see on the F-150 and the Ram right now. As a matter of fact, they look almost identical. Then we look at the air suspension system. Well, the Ram's got that already, and quite frankly, that gives a phenomenal ride. That's why they won Luxury Vehicle of the Year. And now we look at active damping. Well, the Raptor and the Sierra both have that already. It's adaptable, I assume, to other vehicles, but the cost is kind of significant. Then what we got to do is we got to look at the solid axle. The solid axle is present in every one of these trucks, and the reason for that is for towing. That keeps the truck stable. It doesn't have a tendency to want to crawl or walk. There's no solid axle on the Cybertruck, so to me anyways, that's going to be some sort of a little bit of an issue, something that they're going to have to try and overcome. I don't know how or why or how much extra cost that's going to add, but a solid axle does give you the capability for towing. It's a little better for towing. So I want to, at this juncture, I'm not going to give you any conclusions. I'll let you make your own conclusions up. But I would like to thank you for watching. It's been great for us to give you this comparison, and there are more coming, but this is the end of the road here for the suspension and ride and handling. But I'm going to ask one other thing out there. If you have a product, if you're building a product or designing a product and it's not the market leader, or you're not happy with the results you're getting and you want to improve, why don't you email sales@leandesign.com. We've helped out lots of people in every different area. We don't just work on cars. And I'd be delighted to talk to you and give you a quote on what we could do and maybe how we can help. Thanks for watching. Tip your cashiers, and we'll talk to you in the next vignette.